My name is Carol Rosin. I'm an educator who became the first woman corporate manager of an aerospace company, Fairchild Industries. I'm a space and missile defense consultant. I've consulted to a number of companies, organizations, government departments, even the intelligence community. I was a consultant to TRW, working on the MX missile. So I was part of that strategy, which turned out to be a role model for how to sell space-based weapons to the public. And I founded the Institute for Security and Cooperation in Outer Space, a Washington, D.C.-based think tank. I'm an author and have testified before the Congress, the President's Commission on Space, and to a number of committees of that kind of relevance. When I was a corporate manager of Fairchild Industries in 1974 through 77, I met the late Dr. Wernher Von Braun in early 74. At that time, Von Braun was dying of cancer, but he assured me that he would live a few more years in order to tell me about the game that was being played, that game being the effort to weaponize space, to control the Earth from space and space itself. Von Braun had a history of working with weapons systems and had escaped from Peenemünde to come to this country and landed as vice president of Fairchild Industries when I had met him. Von Braun's purpose in life during the last years of his life, his dying years, was to educate the public and decision makers about why space-based weapons are a dumb, dangerous, destabilizing, too costly, unnecessary, unworkable, undesirable idea, and about the alternatives that are available. And as practically a deathbed speech, he educated me about those concepts and who the players were in this game, and gave me the responsibility, since he was dying, of continuing this effort to prevent the weaponization of outer space. He invited me to come up on the platform with him, and actually he's holding on to me in this picture. I'm trying to get off of the platform, and he's holding on to this, trying to make me laugh. He's telling me jokes. When Wernher von Braun was dying of cancer, he asked me to be his spokesperson, to appear on occasions when he was too ill to speak. And I did. And what he asked me to do was to educate decision makers and the public about why we shouldn't be putting weapons in space, why they're a dangerous, destabilizing, too costly, unnecessary, untestable, unworkable idea, and what the alternatives are, how we could be building a cooperative space system. What was most interesting to me was a repetitive sentence that he said to me over and over again during the approximately 4 years that I had the opportunity of working with him, and that was the strategy that was being used to educate the public and decision makers, and the scare tactics, the spin that was being put on a weapons system. And that was how we identify an enemy. The enemy, at first, he said, the enemy against whom we're going to build a space-based weapons system that he thought was a ridiculous idea, unnecessary and very dangerous, not to mention too costly, etc. The strategy that Wernher von Braun taught me was that first the Russians are going to be considered to be the enemy. In fact, when I met him in '74, they were the enemy, the identified enemy. We were told that they had killer satellites. We were told that they were coming to get us and control us, the dirty commies, that whole story. First, the Russians were the enemy against whom we're going to build space-based weapons. Then terrorists would be identified, and that was soon to follow. We heard a lot about terrorism. Then we were going to identify third world country crazies. We now call them nations of concern. But he said that would be the third enemy against whom we would be needing to build space-based weapons. And the funniest one of all was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens. And all of it, he said, is a lie. A lie. I think I was too naive to know at that time the seriousness of the nature of the spin that was being put on the system. And now the pieces are starting to fall into place. We're building a space-based weapon system based on a premise that is a lie, a spin. And Wernher von Braun was trying to hint that to me back in the early 70s and right up until the moment when he died in 1977. What he told me is that there's an accelerated effort in place. He didn't mention a timeline, but he said that it was going to be speeding up faster than anybody could possibly imagine. That the effort to put weapons in space was not only based on a lie, but would accelerate past the point of people even understanding it until it was already up there and too late. When von Braun was dying in front of me the very first day that I met him, he had tubes draining out of his side. And he was tapping on the desk telling me, "You will come to Fairchild." I was a school teacher. "You will come to Fairchild and you will be responsible for keeping weapons out of space." And the way he said it with the intenseness in his eyes, and added that very first day, the first time I met him, that space-based weapons were a dangerous, destabilizing, too costly, unnecessary, untestable, unworkable idea. And that the last card that was being held was the extraterrestrial enemy card. The intensity with which he said that made me realize that he knew something that he was too afraid to mention. He was too afraid to talk about it. He would not tell me the details. I'm not sure that I would have absorbed them if he had told me the details or even believed him in 1974. But there was no question that that man knew, and had a need to know, I found out later. There's no doubt in my mind that Wernher von Braun knew about the extraterrestrial issue. The very first meeting that I had with him in 1974, when he said to me, "You will be responsible for keeping weapons out of space. I'm dying of cancer and you have to take over for me." And when he explained to me the reasons for why weapons were going to be put into space, the enemies against whom we were going to build these weapons, and that all of that was a lie, and when he mentioned the extraterrestrial card, that extraterrestrials, aliens he called them, were going to be identified as the final enemy against whom we were going to build space-based weapons back in '74, the way he said it to me, there was no doubt in my mind that he knew something that he was too afraid to talk about. Wernher von Braun never spoke to me about any of the details that he knew, or might have known, or thought about, related to extraterrestrials, except that extraterrestrials were one day going to be identified as an enemy against whom we are going to have to build an enormous space-based weapon system. Even though he didn't give me the details, however, the look in his eyes made it clear to me that he knew that there was something going on that was a big secret that he could not divulge. Wernher von Braun actually told me that the spin was a lie, that the premise for space-based weaponry, the reasons that were going to be given, the enemies that we were going to identify, were all based on a lie. I've been tracking the space-based weapons issue for about 26 years. I have debated generals, congressional representatives. I've testified before the Congress and the Senate. I've met with people in over 100 countries. And I have not been able to identify who the people are who are making this space-based weapon system happen. I see the news. I see the administrative decisions being made. I know that they're all based on lies and greed. And I have yet to be able to identify who the people are. And that's after tracking this issue for 26 years. I know that there are big secrets being kept. And I know it's time that the public and decision makers pay attention to the people who are now going to be disclosing the truth. And then we need to make some definite changes and build a system in space that will benefit every single person and all the animals and the environment of this planet. The technology is there. The solutions to Earth's urgent and long-term potential problems are there. And I have a feeling that once we start studying this extraterrestrial issue, all of the questions are going to be answered that I've had for 26 years. I have concluded that it's based on a few people making a lot of money and gaining power. It's about ego. It's not about our essence and who we really are on the planet and loving each other and being at peace and cooperating, using technologies to solve problems and heal people in the planet. It isn't about that. It's about a few people who really are playing an old, dangerous, costly game for their own pocketbooks and power struggle. That's all it is. And I believe that this entire space-based weapons game is initiated right here in the United States of America. And what I hope is that with the new administration, I hope that this information that's being disclosed will allow the new administration to do what is right, which is to transform the war game into a space game, so that we use the technologies that are available, not just as spin-offs of war technology, but as direct technological applications to building a cooperative space system that will benefit the entire world and that will allow us to communicate with the extraterrestrial cultures that are obviously out there. I helped to start the movement to prevent the weaponization of outer space. I founded the Institute for Security and Cooperation in Outer Space in Washington, D.C., which was a think tank with an action component. We studied this issue of who was going to benefit from building a space-based weapons program, which is merely an extension of the earthbound war game. Of course, the next highest frontier, the high ground, is outer space. So it's a very natural place for those who play in the war game, who benefit from it, to go into outer space with their weapons. Who would benefit from it are the people who work in that arena. That's people in the military, in industries, in universities and labs, in the intelligence community. And this is not just in the United States, it's worldwide. This is a worldwide cooperative system. Wars are cooperative, just as peace will be when it breaks out. But right now, there are a lot of people benefiting. This is what our economy has been based on in this country and spreading around the world. War. And people suffer as a result. It's not fair. It never has been. People have screamed for, let's build out of swords, let's make plowshares, let's have peace and hold hands around the world, but it hasn't worked because too many people are benefiting. Not only are they benefiting financially, but from what my experience is, there are people who actually believe that Armageddon should happen, so we have to have these wars. So it's going from the pocketbook to the religious right. Some people who actually believe that we have to have wars for these religious reasons. And there are people who just love war. I have met warriors who love to go to war. And then there are the good people, the soldiers, who just take orders. And they have to feed their children and send them to college, so they want to keep their jobs. People in laboratories have told me they don't want to work on these technologies for war, but if they don't, they won't get a paycheck. Who's going to pay them? And what I see is that there are not only dual uses for these technologies, but there are many uses for the same technologies. And once people start to learn, as we learned about the bomb, they start to learn about what's in outer space, this place above all of our heads, this common place above all of our heads in which we can travel, we can build space hospitals, schools, hotels, laboratories, farms, industries. It may sound far out, but if we don't do that, we're going to build battle stations and weapons pointed down all of our throats and into space. And apparently, we've been doing some of that already.